I'm Helena Norberg-Hodge, and I'm Director of Local Futures. And we have now for almost 50 years been promoting what we call localization. All of this started because I ended up in a part of the world that hadn't been globalized. And it turned out that they had not even been affected by Christian missionaries, and they had not been affected by colonialism, and in the modern era, not affected by what I now see as a global cloud of mental pollution that's infecting virtually everybody. It's infecting all of us. And all the time, it romanticizes an urban, competitive, highly specialized, stressful lifestyle while marginalizing more land-based, more community-based, more enjoyable lifestyles. And so it's creating this terrible sense of shame and making farmers and people on the land, particularly in the so-called less developed parts of the world, feel backward and stupid, and it's acting as a sort of sucking mechanism, pulling them away from their villages and from their cultures. In the West, it's exerting this huge pressure, making all of us feel that we're all not beautiful enough, we're all not wealthy enough, we're all not clever enough. So there's this constant pressure to improve and be this great, famous, ideally rich and beautiful person. In the meanwhile, people are more and more cut off from each other, and there's an epidemic of depression and anxiety. And we are therefore very, very committed to trying to get a clear understanding out of what's going on in the world. And above all, we now think that if people could really recognize how big the price is that they're paying by supporting an economic system that's driving all of this, if we can really get also across, a really important message that we're not only getting more depressed and more addicted, but also getting poorer. We're having to work harder and harder just to pay for the rent or for the mortgage on our home, and we're paying more for our food, particularly if we want decent, real food. So we're very privileged in that we're trying to do this as a charity, and we're really encouraging everyone to think about the need for either charitable donations or volunteerism to help build a movement that on the one hand encourages people around you all around the world to rebuild the local fabric, really strengthen community, and do that by creating real bonds of interdependence where you can rely on each other. And when you allow food to be the central economic activity that it was in our whole evolution, so you start rebuilding local food economies, you are helping to provide the security that's absolutely necessary for all of us. Because whether it's going to be climate emergencies or political instability or other violent conflicts, we need to ensure that we all have food security as the number one priority. And so we've been encouraging that, and we're so happy to have contributed to a worldwide local food movement. We also want all of you, and we're trying constantly to raise awareness about how the bigger system really is destroying us. It's destroying our lives, and it's destroying the planet. So not only do we want you to spread that message about how the dominant system is destroying us, but that there is a systemic path forward, and that's called localization. It's a systemic antidote. Once we have clearer language and a clearer picture, we will see a very strong movement. I'm confident of that. So this World Localization Day is about celebrating the movement that's already existing all around the world. And it's now about also providing tools and mechanisms that can help you spread the word. So the film we're going to watch, called Closer to Home, will hopefully be a useful tool to get this message across, both to inspire real action on the ground at the local level, but also to encourage a movement that spreads the word so we build up the political momentum for real policy change. It's quite simple what governments need to do. They need to regulate global business, and they need to start taxing them, and they need to deregulate and reduce taxes on local, regional, and national businesses and on society at large. If that were done, the entire earth would start breathing a sigh of relief. We would benefit people, it would benefit nature, it would benefit the plants, the water, the animals, the living economy that we all depend on. So we're now going to watch the film Closer to Home. And after that, I'll be joined by my dear colleagues, Satish Kumar and Morag for a discussion after the film. Thank you. I am soon hopefully going to be joined by Satish Kumar and Morag to have a bit of a discussion. Morag, there you are. Thanks so much for joining us. And Satish should be joining us very soon. In the meanwhile, I just want to be sure to let all of you who are in the Zoom room, know that you can put questions into the Q&A or in the comments part of the chat. And I'll start by introducing you, Morag, whom I've known since '92 when you were volunteering with us. And it's just wonderful that, you have been active for so long. And of course, Satish, even longer. Satish is a decade older than me almost. And he's been such an inspiration because he's still such a force, a benevolent force for this coming back to earth and this coming back to community, understanding the need for holistic knowledge. And your work has expanded from permaculture and growing on the groundwork to really embrace the need for this educational process. And you've been truly a global ambassador now for such a long time. I know most recently working also in Africa, and it's wonderful to see. And I also want to comment on the fact that it's quite rare, as you probably know, that women take on that larger work of spreading the word, even though I think that most of us have that motivation to get the word out, to try to persuade. We don't want to battle. But to do it in a kind way, in a non-aggressive way, there's no need to be blaming. It's really just trying to get this bigger picture out, which is so clearly something that's going to be beneficial for all of humanity and for the earth. And so I'm very grateful to you for having been a leader in the permaculture movement, also in the eco-village movement, and for helping to promote and establish a wonderful eco-village, where you live. And also want to comment on that now you have a daughter who's becoming an ambassador as well. So can you tell us something about your feelings about the film and how it fits in with your work?
Yeah, well, thank you, Helena. And just to pick up on that piece that you mentioned about women, I mean, I think it's you as a role model in this space has been enormously powerful for so many women, young women like me. I met you first in my early 20s, and to be able to see the possibilities that when you speak up, when you ground yourself, when you have a voice, what you can do with that. What really stuck with me, well, there were so many things about this film, and I look forward to sharing it everywhere that I possibly can, Helena. But this idea of making things visible, and that's both making visible what's going on on the ground, the local permaculture projects, the local community projects, all of that, finding a way to give voice to those things, but at the same time making visible all the things that are going wrong. So there's this tension that's held consistently, that it's not a hopeless message. It's a message actually filled with potency, because once you see the backstory, something lights up in your belly, a fire lights up in your belly, and you cannot let it go. All you can do is to spend your time finding ways to explore different pathways. And so, I've been living, yes, for 25 years in the eco-village and 30 years in community projects and permaculture projects, and really trying to find that deep rootedness in place, in community, having a sense of belonging, really deeply caring about my community, the more than human community. And what happens when you do that is you find that, as you're saying in the film, that you matter. And I think that is so important, finding that sense of purpose, and that, yes, it actually matters how I show up every day and what I do and what I say. And that gives me a huge sense of purpose in what I do. And I know that everyone that I come across, once that sense of that sort of deep sense of connection, something shifts inside your heart. And there's so many quotes that came out of the film, and I've got pages full of notes here of things, but really this sense of a deep sense of care. John Jondi was talking about how all that anyone cares about at the moment now is money. But what I found, what I think attracted me to the permaculture movement after spending time with you, was the fact that at its very core is this ethic of care, earth care, people care, fair share, and being in solidarity with people who are trying to do something on the other side of the planet. And as you mentioned, I work a lot in East Africa these days. And I think, finding a way to be in solidarity with people who are on the forefront of climate change, who are on the forefront of the impact of colonialization and an impact of corporatization. We often hear about, decolonization and degrowth, but I think what we need to be focused, how do we decorporatize our food system, decorporatize our education system, decorporatize our clothing, our housing. And, I've been spending my lifetime practicing what that might look like in, building a home out of materials that I could find locally. Like, I know where all the railings and the bench tops in my house are from. I can point to the tree, the hill where they came from, and my food is surrounding me. And looking at the educational system as well, I kind of fell into homeschooling and unschooling, actually. And I'd never expected to do that, Helena. I'd grown up with a teacher as a mum, and I really had this value of education. But as I started to unschool my children and be part of this unschooling movement, and working with Manish and others, really understanding that is one of the biggest parts, isn't it? There's a different kind of education that's needed, a different kind of work, the kind of work that I've been exploring through thinking about how our work can be. I spent a lot of time exploring eco-villages around the world. And when I went and spent some time at Damanhur in Italy, and I really loved the way that they had this approach where 1/3 of the work was towards community service, 1/3 of the work was towards learning and sharing, and the other third of the work was towards income generation. And it resonated with me so much, because it reminded me too of the kind of the pattern, the ease of pattern of work in Ladakh, that it wasn't this 9 to 5, that there was a spaciousness that existed. So there were some of my reflections.
Oh, thank you, Morag. Thank you. Satish, so glad to see you. Satish, can you hear me?
Yes, I just got the. Sorry, I just got the link. So
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So can't understand what
watched the
happened there.
film.
But it's so lovely to see you. I'm glad it worked out, since you didn't get the link. So I should introduce you, Satish. I mean, most people know you now from the film, but you are a great inspiration to so many of us, including Morag, who's here, who's been at Schumacher College and in Resurgence magazine, and you've been holding this vision of a holistic view of the world to promote peace on this planet, to promote deep ecological relationships between humans and the earth. You've been holding that vision now for 65 years, is it?
Thank you. Thank you. Long time. Yeah.
As a peace pilgrim, that must be about 60 some years ago. And above all, as we mentioned in the film, you are the founder of Schumacher College, and you've been putting out this wonderful magazine, Resurgence, for 50 years, isn't it? And
60,
also,
nearly 60 years.
Is it 60 now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're so grateful to you, and we want also everyone to know that these efforts require financial support, and we really need to be looking to philanthropy to keep the vision going. We know that this is what most people want, but unfortunately, when we have a system that is so corporatized, it's very difficult to keep Schumacher College going. So I really hope that people will both spread the word and also spread the word about the need for both philanthropy and volunteerism. Let's not fall for the corporate language of only investment and everything has to be for profit. Right now in this system, it's very hard to compete with a system where the subsidies support energy-intensive, job-poor activities. So, Satish, do you want to say something about your reflections about the film?
Yes, I think it's a marvelous film. It's a very succinct and to the point, and you have brought so many wonderful thinkers, activists, pioneers. They're all in the film, working together, upholding the local future, and empowering every individual. When you have a centralized system, few people have too much to do and many people have nothing to do because all the power has been taken away from them. And so this decentralized, localized future where empowers every human being, and every human being is able to contribute to their best of their ability, that is possible only when you have a local initiative, a local economy, but also local initiatives in every field: education, spirituality, religion, business. Everything has to be on a human scale. And that was the message of the film. And it came over very well, very clearly from many different points of view: scientific, spiritual, ecological, economic, many different points of view the film brought together. It's a very good, impressive, well-made film.
Thank you so much, Satish. Also, I want to be sure to say that, no, we don't have everybody in there because, we had this big Planet Local Summit, and there were many other voices we wanted to include in the film, but bowing down to the knowledge of filmmakers to keep it short enough and engaging enough, unfortunately, there are voices that were left out, that we're very happy that we were able to include as many voices as we were able to. And we urge everyone also to look at showing a film like this or other films, and then having a local panel of people who are doing this kind of work, so that this way voices in your region can be heard, supported by a chorus of global voices. Because one of the things we're up against, Satish, is that in promoting localization or decentralization, the really important work is done on a small scale. And it's also at a slower pace, so it can feel insignificant. And so it's really important that we're reminded that we're actually part of something that billions of people are either involved with or benefiting from. So also,
Helena, all big things come from small. A huge big oak tree comes from a small acorn. A huge river like Ganges or whatever river, they are made of many, many small tributaries. So small is beautiful, and from small comes big, like oak tree, but then there's the optimum size. And beyond that, tree does not grow. Humans start from a child, 2 foot or 3 foot or small foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 5 foot 6, and then more or less you stop. So everything has an optimum size. So small is beautiful, and the small grows into a little bit bigger, but not too big. And so optimum size, human scale. Small is beautiful, slow is beautiful, human scale is beautiful. And that was the message of Mahatma Gandhi. That was the message of Martin Luther King. That I met him, and he also said that I'm inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, and he believed in local economy as well as non-violence. And then E.F. Schumacher, and then you are pioneering in the you are a new Gandhi of our time. And so this is a kind of work we have to do. So empowering every single person, that's my passion, that every single person has a unique quality. And if we don't use everybody's talent, then we are just using a few people, and then we are going into technology and AI. Why do we have to have AI, Helena, when we have 8 billion people with tremendously real, not artificial, but real living talent and living intelligence of 8 billion people? We need to invest, and we need to put our effort and time and energy to develop human intelligence rather than wasting money and resources and so much. That AI and other technology, they need so much energy, so much fossil fuel, so much to store that data. You have a lot of water, and all the metal and all the plastic and all the mining, so much waste, where the human intelligence, real intelligence, being wasted and unused, and centralization, and at the top everything, centralization forgets the talent of everybody. So I think we need to put more effort in developing human intelligence and local level, so that everybody can make their contribution rather than this centralized technological future, which is a nightmare.
I'm so grateful to you for saying that, because for me, at the very center of the choice we now face, in the fork in the road, is on the one hand, AI, and that means, like you say, more energy, more minerals. And the search for minerals now includes the deep sea ocean, where they're using sonar, destroying the communications of whales, and essentially destroying life in the sea, and competing over minerals on Mars. This massive search and mining and pollution worldwide to replace human beings with these scarce resources. And on the other side, we have, as you say, 8 billion people who are already showing how they prefer to live. They're already showing that in this toxic, top-down, artificial system, they are addicted, they are depressed, they are committing suicide. And for young people in particular, this is an absolute dead end. They know that the only hope is for a meaningless, stressful job. In the meanwhile, we know that there is so much meaningful work that comes from the deeper connections to people, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in mental healthcare, whether it's in gardening, all the things we care about. We want to be with people, and we want more time to care for each other, for ourselves, and for the rest of life. We've seen how even bringing a dog into an old people's home can lighten people's spirit, because we're so cut off from life. And this life of being connected to the animals and the plants didn't cost anything. And because it didn't cost anything, and because people lived like that without making money, they were called poor. And this is, we're still facing that the poorest of the poor countries is Bhutan in terms of GDP. Anyone who has the privilege to go there will see that it's actually one of the wealthiest countries. So, yeah, right now, thank you so much, Satish, for bringing up the topic of AI, which, as you know, is being discussed more and more. But what I'm feeling very sad about is how many people who, like Morag and you and I, want this more nature-based, ecological and community-based way of living. They are flirting with AI, and they're being persuaded that AI may actually help us move in the right direction. And we know that it's so costly. We know that it not only costs so much money, but so many resources and so much energy that of course we're not going to choose that. We of course want to be choosing the path that instead provides livelihood for people. Morag, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I was just going to say too that it's not actually bringing a life force back, whereas actually the internet of the underground, the mycelial networks that exist, which support all life and support all of us, if we tend to those, if we tend to the soil, if we tend to considering how all of these different projects and programs and organizations and local initiatives are actually deeply woven together in a web of relationships that wrap the planet. There's a question from Kent in the chat around, what about if all of these groups got together? I think there is cross-fertilization happening already, but hosting conversations, like you were saying, Helena, locally, where you bring together not just people of like mind, but people from different dimensions that can have a conversation that maybe is a meta conversation, the localized conversation that brings together the planners, the environmentalists, the local economy people, all of the different people together in a space. So hosting conversations, I think, and tending to that sort of feeding the mycelial networks that exist socially in our community and really tending to the ecological mycelial networks is where the power lies, and the power for change.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And people are talking about climate change. All the governments meet and had talk about climate change. COP this, COP that, COP 26, COP 28, COP 29, COP. I think this COP is becoming COP out. And they are increase this AI and all the technological progress that we are talking about. This AI is going to increase the global warming, increase the carbon emission, increase the climate change. So on the one hand, they say we want to stop climate going bad and global warming, and on the other hand, they are fostering it. So but the problem, Helena, is that our modern world looks at nature and they think that nature, we can take from nature what is good and then use nature as a sink, like a waste bin, and put all the pollution, the plastic in the ocean, the sewage in the river, the poison in the soil, and so much carbon emission. So we use nature as a sink for our waste and use good things of the nature as a resource. So I always say nature is not a resource for the economy. Nature is source of life itself. If we treat nature as only as a resource for making money, making profit, making technology, that is the fundamental mistake of this modern industrial centralized systems. So we need to say that nature is not a resource for the economy. Nature is not only a means to an end. The nature is the end, and your industry and your money should be the means, and protecting nature and nature integrity should be the end. And also, not only nature is being used as a resource, humans are being used as a resource. We say human resources, HR. Every government, every business has HR, human resources. So humans have become a resource for making money, making profit, running organization, big corporations, big business, and humans have no dignity. Humans are just a tool to make profit. So nature is denigrated and kind of sort of disrespected, and humans are disrespected. Humans have no value, nature have no value, only economy, money, profit. That is a kind of nightmare. And so I would say that we need to put nature before profit, nature, humans before profit, and profit and money should be the means, and human dignity and integrity of nature and local communities and local art, craft, music, dance, local community doing local things, enjoying their life, living a good life in harmony with nature, in harmony with each other. That should be the aim, not this economic growth and money growth and profit growth. That is the mistake.
Absolutely. And I think it's important now that we distinguish between what most people want and what, unfortunately, our governments are doing, because they're listening to what has arisen as a sort of corporate empire of interlinked banks and corporations that are so far removed from people and nature that they can only see us as numbers. So the distance in itself creates a type of psychopathic behavior, because when you can't see, when we allow people to become numbers, and when we allow nature to become numbers, then we have a structure that becomes monstrous. So it's so much to do with scale, which again comes back to Schumacher's vital central message about scale. And Gandhi also was very clear about decentralization. And just recently, I was told by some economists in Switzerland that they also see me as one of the few people who sort of stayed with that message. And I want to urge people who are listening not to be afraid to comment on the economy. I have tried to urge many of my ecological writers and activists to speak out about the economy. And very often they'll say, "Oh, I'm not an economist." Now, that's part of the disease that Satish also knows, that we've been brainwashed and compartmentalized into seeing ourselves as this thing that we were trained into. And this is partly because our education for a very long time has been linked to supporting a very large-scale industrial extractive system that sees us and nature as a resource to grow the economy. Grow the economy for whom? It's been growing to extract wealth to the top. That is how and why billionaires who already have 100 billion are getting richer. And these trade treaties we mentioned in the film are central for us to understand, how is this happening? How are governments growing the economy so that we get poorer and these global players get richer and richer? Once we see...
Helena, the word economy, they talk about economy, but what they are doing is not economy. Economy means management of the planet home. What they are doing is money-nomy. It's a money-nomy. And they are using the good name of economy but they are actually doing is money-nomy. I went to speak at the London School of Economics, and I asked them, what is economy? You are at London School of Economics. Do you know what economy is? And they said, yes, we know what economy is. I said, tell me, what is economy? They said, balance sheet, profitability, bottom line, banking, budget. I said, that's not economy. That's a money-nomy. You are managing money. Economy. Yes. And then I said to them at London School of Economics, I said, do you teach ecology? They said, no, we don't teach ecology. We teach economy. I said, but economy means management of planet home, ecosystem. And ecology means knowledge of ecosystem. How are you going to manage something which you don't know? So knowing and managing go together. And so you must teach ecology and economy together, and it should go back to true economy and not call economy money-nomy as economy. If you are misnamed, like you are actually practicing money-nomy and calling it economy, that's a misuse of the word. So economic growth is not growth in trees and rivers and soil and birds and animals and humans. There's no growth in that. The growth is how much money is growing, how much GDP is growing, how much kind of profitability is growing. So it's a completely misnomer. Economy is not real economy. It's a money-nomy.
And isn't it sad how, the concept of home economics has been really dismissed as being something small. It's just what women do, and you do crafts and things. I remember at school, if you were doing home economics, you were looked down upon, whereas that is the core and the heart of it. My daughter, who you mentioned before, Helena, has actually gone to the main university in Australia in Canberra to study economics, philosophy, and politics. And I've been grilling her about what she's learning. She's learning nothing about ecological systems, and it's only because she's come from within this life of growing up in an eco village, of doing warm data systems thinking, meeting all of you, and what I would love to see is a way that we can actually bring this knowledge in. But I think it's perhaps with her generation, who has this broader knowledge, who can start to tie all these different links together and speak up. So we need to be there to support and offer independent knowledge systems, independent educational opportunities that can enhance the learning that's offered in the mainstream system, because it's just not coming through. And they're not learning about any of the important things there. They've not even talked about donut economics. They've not turned about any ecological economics whatsoever. And she's in second year. And I think it's just it's absolutely frightening, really.
Yeah, and it's so frightening.
Helena, if I may, I would like to bring another word in our conversation, and that is love. Because my latest book is Radical Love. And what is missing in our industrial, centralized, global economy is love. They are just there as functionaries. And when we have a local economy, then locally you can love your craft, you can love your community, you can love your customers, you can love your friends. They come to you, you serve them, you take care of them. So love economy, like Hazel Henderson used to say, this was her word, love economy. So love economy can only be practiced when it's a local. Because you cannot love global, because how can you love BP and Apple and Amazon and all those sort of big companies? You have to have a customer. At the moment, there's no love in big economy. So I want to say love is the core of local economy. Love is the core of local community. Community has been based in love. So whatever we do with love. We do love with gardening, we do with love. Farming, we do with love. Building, we do with love. Serving each other, taking care of each other. And money is only a facilitator. Money is only a kind of means to an end, just to kind of make it easier to exchange goods and services. Money is not the boss. At the moment, money has become the boss. I want to make love as the boss. And love comes first. Before democracy, love comes first. Then democracy. Because if there's no love, democracy is no guarantee for good government. So democracy, everybody talks about democracy. I said, before you talk democracy, talk about love. Then people say science is important. But science can produce nuclear weapons. Science can produce bad technology. Science is the cause of global warming. So without love, science is also dangerous. So love first, then science. Even truth, Helena. Truth can divide. My truth, your truth. We can kill each other in the name of truth. So before truth, we have to bring love. So why I am committed to local economy? Because only the local level and a community level, at a small scale, personal level, you can practice love. You can practice spirituality. Without love and spirituality, for me, nothing else. So I am, as you can understand, being a Gandhian and being a kind of coming from this background. So I feel that we need to bring love, radical love, at the core, at the kind of basis for which we are advocating local future, local economy, community-based economy, because that is the purpose.
Yeah. And, also, I think a Swedish colleague of mine, he used to talk about the choice between fear and love. And when we look at the choice we have today, the dominant system is fear-based. And it is at every step a path of disconnection, which with disconnection and distance, how are we going to have love? As Satish says, to absolutely be able to empathize, to feel and to care and to love, we need that connection. So this is the path of connection. It's the path of love. It's the path of life. It's the path of how we manage to survive on this planet for tens of thousands of years without destroying ourselves or the planet. Tens of thousands of years. And be aware that as this trading system grew, it also started putting out a narrative which told us that in the past we were always fighting. In the past we were stupid and we died age 40. All of that is propaganda for a path of progress towards extracting wealth for global traders. So I think we have a very clear message. It is so positive. We have some questions now. I wonder how, Morag, for instance, here one of the questions is, how can the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, help in spreading this message of saving the environment? What do you say to that? We're a bit skeptical about the SDGs. Have you had much experience looking at them?
One SDG that's really problematic is SDG number 8, which is around growth. And I think the way that the SDGs are defined and described and compartmentalized actually pulls apart from this fabric of the whole that we need to address. What I've done with a whole group of permaculture colleagues is to redescribe and redefine the SDGs through a permaculture lens. So how can you describe growth through a permaculture lens? How can you describe all of them? And this was really powerful because it gave the possibility for us all to describe our projects and start to put them up on the SDG site so that when you look at what an SDG is, the examples come up as permaculture. And the other thing I think is really important around the SDGs is that we have a tendency in organizations to just pick one. Oh, we're doing SDG number 3, 5, and 7. No, they can't. They were never meant to be just pulled apart like that. If you do all of them together, then that has a holistic framework. But I think they've been diminished essentially, and I think we can create a whole different series of ways of thinking. But the possibilities of having a bigger conversation through these, but redescribing them has potency, I think.
Well, I don't know, Satish, do you have a sort of position on that?
Sustainable development goal, 3 words. All those 3 words are not very inspiring. Sustainable is very inspiring. And what is sustainable? So there's no good. And development is also a very misnomer. Development, in the name of development, we are destroying our local economies, our arts, crafts, skills. I mean, people are losing all the skills. We don't know how to grow food, how to build a house, in the name of development and progress, we have destroyed our culture, our skills, and our abilities to make, to build, to grow, to cook, to do so many things. I mean, if you look at the past, as you mentioned, I'm just glorifying the past, but in the past, people were able to build beautiful buildings like Taj Mahal or pyramids or many beautiful cathedrals and churches. Not that I'm advocating them, but I'm saying that the craftsmanship there. So the craftsmanship has lost in the sustainable development ideas. And the goal is always on the future. I want to have, how can we do now? The future begins now. What action we take now? So I think sustainable development goals are very compromising, very kind of trying to please everybody and pleases nobody. So I think we need to think in terms of real something more. And also we need to, sustainable goals are very much external, outer change. And we also need to have inner change. And the inner change is to cultivate our celebration, our joy, our love, our compassion, our sense of beauty, sense of creativity, sense of poetry, sense of art. All those things are missing in sustainable development goals. They're all about economic. And so I think we need a new, not sustainable, not development, not goal. These 3 words are not very good, not very inspiring. We need something new formulation, and that would be good.
Well, I really agree with you, Satish, and I also want to add that even though there are many well-intentioned people in the UN, as a whole, the UN is representatives of governments from around the world who are in service to this global corporate growth paradigm. So growth today, as measured by GDP, supports global corporations and banks to become richer And countries themselves are even getting poorer because they're allowing banks, private banks, to print money as debt to the government. So the governments are actually poorer. And sadly, therefore, our government and the UN are in service as a priority to this type of growth, which is suicidal, which, as John Perkins says in the film, is really a death economy. And remember, again, it's a death economy because it cannot support the diversity of human life or any other life, which means it cannot support life. Diversity is a fact of life. And what Satish is saying, the uniqueness of every human being, being able to be creative, and right now, using skills that we are born with to rebuild the important central needs that we have, and so that means the food, the shelter, the clothing, the food being, of course, and by far the most urgent and important, which is why we cannot overstress the need for supporting the local food movement, which is why permaculture is such an important movement worldwide. But I also have a question here talking about how foundations are trying to support communities by supporting local nature-based solutions. But because they are now shaped, again, by a commercial system that's framing everything in this commercial way, they're looking at packaging these projects in financial assets to leverage their capacity of investment. This is why I mentioned earlier, we actually need to realize that when Satish and I started this work, you're a bit too young, Morag, but when we started this work, people were wanting to see genuine charity. Schumacher reminded people that charity that creates dependence is not what we want. We want charity that allows people, supports people to become self-reliant. So that is also the answer to this question now. Please do everything you can to educate these foundations about the fact that by promoting this investor-based, nature-based solutions approach, they are supporting the death economy. They are ultimately supporting the death economy. For a little while, it might look like a good thing because they help small farmers produce on a larger scale for a distant market, all of it becoming more commercialized and less healthy. The shortening of links and providing the real skills and the money to support the local circular economy, not the corporate circular economy, the local society's circular economy is what we need. But
I
do you want
mean,
to add?
people say that these bankers and business people and businesses create wealth, but that is not true. Money is not wealth, Morag. Money is only a measure of wealth. The real wealth is our skills, human skills, our hands. And our hands can create a miracle. The miracle. With these two hands, I can weave, I can play music, I can build a house, I can grow food, I can build a house, I can do so many things. And our modern industrial centralized global economy is destroying our skills of hands. Now young people can only use two thumbs to do their kind of smartphone, and nothing else they can do with their hands. They don't know how to do anything. So we are discarding, destroying, eliminating the real wealth, which is skill, and creating this artificial wealth. And the real wealth is, apart from skills, is talent and imagination and creativity. And then real wealth is land and forest and trees. I mean, trees grow.
Community. Yeah.
Community, exactly. Community is real wealth. So these are the real wealth. And so if we just say wealth is money and money creators are wealth creators, and the skillful people, they are not paid even better. The people who are working in the bank can get £500 an hour, and the people who are working on the land get £10 or £15 an hour. So it's a kind of, we need local economy respected again.
Before we move to another question, I'd just like to jump in on that idea of like the foundations. I think there's a really important role to play for a relocalization of this too. And this is something that we've been trying to play with. We have a small trust base philanthropy model going on here, where it's very much people to people, connecting people in East African refugee settlements, in Indigenous Australian communities, with the permaculture community around the world, and coming to know one another, coming to understand each other more, coming to understand what the issues are, and through those conversations, identifying what are the relationships of transfer of money that can activate those skills, the building of local demonstration centres, the activation of local sewing hubs, and the things that will meet local needs. And so I think this trust-based philanthropy model of a relocalised distribution from people to people has an enormous amount of power, and it just needs a few people to organise. You know, like, we do it very simply. Like, I do it completely as a volunteer. Any money that gets donated to us, 100% gets sent across. It doesn't take an enormous amount of time, but it does make a huge difference, being able to do some of that redistribution.
And I will also say that I've been involved in some of that type of philanthropy, and there are now models also where the people who are distributing also keep a small proportion for their time and effort, which I think actually probably works better in a world where people are so short of time. But definitely when you have the ability, as some wealthy donors have understood, that they don't know enough themselves and they want to pass it along to people they trust, who will then be distributing it to people they know and they have personal knowledge of them. And this is a way that foundations can be encouraged to spread the wealth in a way that would be really meaningful. And ideally, there will be also certain caveats about preventing ultimately the money from feeding the growth monster. And the typical thing that's happening is that in the so-called third world, there's a lot of good intention going into how can we help people, grow their economy to be better off. And they don't understand that if they're growing it within the dominant framework, it's going to end up feeding the monster. Whereas if they have a clear understanding of localization, then it can be a genuinely nurturing circular economy. And Morag, I really hope, and Satish too, that you'll join us, because we are planning to do a course which will be a sort of training in this alternative economic path. And we're so happy to see that there is more and more interest in localization now, as the global corporations are becoming more obviously a monstrous death economy. So we have some more questions. And
Helena, I have to go, unfortunately. Can you do the rest of the questions? It was a great pleasure to be with you, but I have another 11:30. I have another appointment.
Oh, okay. Satish, before you leave us, maybe perhaps a few more words of wisdom. Do you want to tell us about Schumacher College?
Yes, very briefly. Schumacher College was established in 1991, and we have many wonderful teachers like yourself, Helena, and many other. And Morag was one of our students there, and now she's our teacher. So we have many wonderful people who have been to Schumacher College and now doing very good leading work in this movement. And so now we are in the process of, but we have been supported by Dartington Hall Trust, and they have wonderful people like John Lane and Morris Ash and many others who supported Schumacher College from the very beginning. But now we are grown up and we are well established. We have 20,000 alumni around the world. So we are talking with Dartington Hall Trust, who has been the owner and patron of Schumacher College, to make Schumacher College independent. And we are in the negotiation, and we hopefully that they have in principle agreed, but we need to find some practical ways. So if we become independent, then we'll be able to manage Schumacher College and teach, because we need a new education where our young people can learn to have skills of gardening, cooking, making, building, community, local economy. All these things have to be trained and educated. At the moment, our universities are educating our young people, future generation, in the same old paradigm of great kind of centralized, big scale world economy and a kind of global economy. And so if we want to shift that, we have a new generation of young leaders who are trained to think in a different way. And so this is why Schumacher is very important, and we want to continue it, and we want to be independent. And so if any listeners who are interested in it, please contact me or contact Helena or Morag. We are all part of the same movement, and that'll be wonderful to have your support. But we are continuing, and the college is going very well. We are running some short courses at the moment, and we have food and farming as a very important part of our Schumacher College. And so that's our work.
Thank you, Satish, so much.
My pleasure. It has been a great pleasure to be with you, and sorry that I have to leave a bit early. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. So, Morag, are you seeing some of these questions as well?
There was a question for Satish there at the end. There was a question around tourism and travel and in a local future world. I wonder whether you might address that one, actually, particularly.
Well, that I will address, because I actually have a new friend who's a travel writer who was inspired by our work, and she is now promoting slow travel. She is promoting a much deeper knowledge of the place where you go, spending more time there, getting to know the people. And I've discovered again and again that it's those exchanges with the local culture and the real human exchanges that actually give people joy. When they rush around just looking at monuments and the biggest Buddha here and the oldest fort there, it's pretty meaningless, and it's all about taking photos to go back home to show off. Look what I've done, look where I've been. But when you're actually in the here and now, whether it's the animals and the forest or the people, it's the life that is what can give you so much more. And much slower travel over shorter distances will be much more rewarding. And there are more and more people discovering that. And there's someone
permaculture. Oh, sorry.
How do I live in the now? And I have for a long time been urging others and telling myself that we need to be a bit schizophrenic, actually, because again, remember, we're in this world where two systems are influencing us. One of them is a man-made, patriarchal, artificial, urbanizing, commercializing, competitive, and actually war-based, fear-based system. The other one is nature, and nature isn't all peace and apple pie. Nature has some hard truths, but nature is our home, and nature is where we feel at home. And that includes in the deeper embedding with other human beings in a broader based community fabric, not just inside sort of a lockdown nuclear family, because that actually is why from Jung and Freud and in psychotherapy, people never studied health. They didn't study healthy people because they studied neurotic people who'd been pushed away from our real home. And so I think we haven't quite understood the wealth that we can create by helping our children connect to more significant others, not just inside the nuclear family. And people like Gabor Mate, they've seen studies and tell us about studies that show that when children have deeper contact with their grandparents, that's an important plus in developing a deeper sense of self-respect and confidence. And that's a prerequisite for tolerance and love, as Satish was talking about. So,
and also that deeper connection with place. What Bai was talking about, we're educated out of context. And I think that's really what I love too about things like permaculture. It helps us to really slow down and connect with place and start to be informed by the community, the culture, the landscape, the water, all of those things start to inform us. And if we engage our children in that and bring woofers and like the tourists, like the traveling volunteers who come around in that process. That kind of education is different, and that's the kind of education that I think is so important in the world, which is why, you know, I dedicate my life to sharing permaculture and creating opportunities for learning around this, to deeply connect and slow down and notice and be part of that
And
natural
what I
world.
started to say, and sort of got lost as I do, is that in this complex situation we're in, I feel we need to be a bit schizophrenic, if you like, in that we need to devote some of our time to putting on that left brain, future-based perspective, to try to see where we can be more constructive and to pay attention to what's going on in the world. However, we owe it to ourselves, to our children, to everyone around us, to encourage that we also cultivate this conscious now, where we allow the deep relaxation to come from allowing our full brain to come to function and becoming more embodied, more sensual. And for me, what I do to cultivate that is essentially walking in nature, hiking in the mountains, and well, hiking by the sea and mountains. That's probably my most enjoyable spiritual healing, and it's something I try to practice on it. And I do practice on a daily basis. Walking in nature is my way of granting myself that sense of joy and that sense of deep spiritual connectedness to the rest of life. And I urge everyone to do that, but not to fall into the trap of thinking, I must just focus on that meditation and I must make sure that I have 100% peace on the inside before I engage with the outside. The wonderful thing that's happening, that I'm sure you're also seeing, Morag, is this coming together where there used to be the idea of activism bad and spirituality good, or the other way around. But now on both sides, people realize we need to tend to the inner work and the outer work.
And that they both inform one another. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then have you in your work now seen more interest in localization as a movement? Are you seeing that?
Incredibly. It's what I think, and what I mentioned in the film. There's this deep yearning. I hear it all the time. I'm connected with people around the world who are looking for a way into this, and I've never before had so much interest in it. So I feel there is this great turning, this cultural turning that that you speak about in the film. And I think the task, I feel part of my task is to create spaces where we can share those stories more and where we can speak out about it. And having a deep groundedness where I am in my place and my community, I feel like I have that sort of the strength, the rootedness to be able to speak up and do that. And I think that's one of the really important parts of connecting with community, that we have a place that holds us so that we can stick our neck out. You know, if we don't feel so held, we don't feel so stable to speak up. And I think that's one of that local, global, the power of being in both spaces simultaneously is really important.
And I also just want to add that when we say local, global, that there's this fundamental difference between the global cultural exchange, cooperation, deeper dialogue, and globalizing economic activity. So ideally, the term we might use for the connections that we're building to build that sense of empowerment and deep strengthening at every level in so-called rich countries, so-called poor countries, is through international collaboration and deeper dialogue. Whereas the globalizing path, let's remember, really, it's synonymous with creating wealth for fewer and fewer corporations. And it's the corporate structure and the trade treaties that have been fundamental. It's not anywhere about just individuals. It's not anywhere a politics of identity. It's a politics of structures and systems, and the direction is going, the commercialization. But I think I want to mention that we also have another new film called The Power of Local, which my colleague Anja Lyngbeck has put together by looking at some of the initiatives around the world that we're familiar with and putting that into a film. So for people who are interested in concrete examples of what's going on, this new film, The Power of Local, is also available. And I think we're going to be able to play a trailer in a little while of that. And I hope that all of you who are listening, that you will watch that and also use it as a tool. Someone asked me about what percentage of the world is living in a more localized way. And I, when we look at the fact that in India and in many parts of the so-called poor world, 50% of the population is still engaged in farming and more rurally based. We are talking about billions of people. And so this person is asking how many localization type programs there are. The programs which are the more active attempt to either strengthen and protect the existing localized systems or to rebuild them, particularly in the Western world, those are probably, well, you're asking if they could be 20%. Very hard to estimate. Very hard to estimate. And also because for our side of things, we need teams of researchers. I mean, this is amazing what we could do if we had the resources, even to document those. Actually, I think it must be more than 20% when I think about it, because in places where I have lived, where I have been place-based, and I've been in touch with, I've helped to create localization initiatives, I am thrilled to tell you that regularly I hear of new things that I didn't know about within a half-hour drive. Because once you understand what we're talking about, once you understand that it's about the community-based birthing movement, it's about the community-based ways of dying, it's about bringing back home our ability to care for each other and for the earth, you will see this cultural turning everywhere you look. If you are interested also in seeing how I learned most of this is not coming from me, this is coming from my experience in Ladakh, please read my book, Ancient Futures, because already in the 70s, I was seeing that part of this unconscious cultural turning towards what I call ancient futures, it is about relearning. This is not just about local, it's about the more feminine, the more caring, the more loving way that Satish is talking about. And I was seeing that one of the trends was tearing down the walls and making the kitchen the center of the house. The reason that was so clear as part of a new unconscious cultural trend was because on the other side of the world, I was seeing people doing the opposite. There in the so-called poor countries, the kitchen had been this huge center of the house, the hearth, the center, cooking shared by an intergenerational group, the babies there, the great-grandparents there, with a sort of ease and a flow. And now, suddenly the imageries of progress and making you feel stupid and backward made you feel even, you were dirty and backward, and cleanliness was part of the propaganda, but also even the fumes from the smell of food were now considered not proper for having a nice room where visitors could come. This has been documented in Ireland by anthropologists, and as the propaganda for creating wealth for the few spreads across the world, how it destroyed so many natural functions. But seeing them unconsciously returning has made us, we would be able to document so much that, yes, we would be saying actually a lot more than 20%, a lot more of 20% in terms of evidence that people are moving in that direction and that they want this. But then the force of the money and the propaganda and even laws often pulling us in the opposite direction. But when you add to that this culture returning in the West, and the reality of how much of this life still exists in the third world. We're talking about maybe close to 50%, maybe.
I think
I don't
something
know if
that's
you haven't thought about that, Morag.
Yeah, well, what I have noticed with permaculture, for example, is when the conversations are happening, say in an Indonesian village or in an African refugee settlement or wherever it's taken, it's one of those things, and I remember you talking about it in Ladakh too. It's about having a conversation that helps to shift the values that people place on these traditional practices. So all of a sudden you start to open up new conversations rather than it being seen as something backward and primitive, as actually something that is central to how we're moving forward and central to how we can create well-being now. And this has been an enormously powerful role that I've seen permaculture being able to play, just simply this opening of conversations, not to tell how to do something, but just to be in a space having the conversations about those holistic framework of living in connection with nature, in connection with community, and relocalizing.
Yeah, I think also what we found is that letting people know the truth about the fact that this media mirage about this incredible wealth and a life where you don't work and all that is a myth, and that we're pretty unhappy in it. So the truth about our unhappiness and so on is a very important part of the message. So I think now we will move on to show the trailer. Unless, Morag, do you have any parting words for us?
I think just really where we began is like taking the time to slow down, to connect, taking the time to make visible what is going on in your own place, and find a way to share it, even with a small group of people to begin with, and allow that kind of mycelial process to happen. Nothing is too small. Everything makes a difference, and you never know when you show up with that, with the love and the care and the kindness, that it ripples out far further than you can ever possibly imagine. And not having to know where it goes as well. You just send off that way of seeing and way of being, and it opens up possibilities.
Yeah, I so agree. And I think we have a message that is pretty powerful, which says, we can help you explore how you can, from today till tomorrow, take steps that will make you feel better in your personal life and contribute to healing the entire planet. It's a big claim, but that's really what this bigger picture can help you provide. And I would actually say that, the first step often is to join a small human scale group. And that could be maybe just 2 or 3 friends. And I would argue, ideally not more than 20, 30 that would meet on a regular basis with that goal. What can we do to improve our lives right now and that of the planet? In terms of improving your own life, even joining a group where you together support each other in experiencing the nature connection can mean that one of you can look for places to visit. You can do a DIY vision quest without paying very much money at all. Go out with families, as people often do in Australia, but with a conscious goal of also helping children, not just to be playing ball and surfing, but to spend some time in a more meditative, spiritually engaged way with their environment. And then sitting around the fire and sharing from that deeper, vulnerable perspective where we're willing to talk about our problem. We have to be able to feel that we are loved with all our warts and problems. And perhaps, I guess I think that this robbery of that ability for us as children to feel fine just the way we were, that is the fundamental building block that this progress and modern exploitative system created. Robbing us of that and rebuilding that is not as difficult as it might seem, but we have to understand the key. And the key is that community-based healing. And this is why the cultural turning, quite spontaneous, is happening now. People are sitting in circle, often men's groups, often fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. And it's happening. It's really happening, but it could happen much faster and much more effectively if we put the word out and help people to do it. It does not have to be an expensive workshop. It can be DIY. So that's also what Morag is saying. And I thank you so much, Morag. And I look forward to collaborating on a course that gets this central message out more.
Wonderful. And I look forward to, you'll be joining us in a week's time in the permaculture community to have a discussion around permaculture and localization. So I'll share that out in all the social media. And tomorrow we're also screening, as part of our celebration of World Localization Day, we're screening Planet Local tomorrow. Last week we screened Economics of Happiness, and the week before we screened Ancient Futures. So we're always finding ways to try and open up and have the conversations. And I think, yeah, tapping into your resources that you have, the films, and sharing those out widely and using that as a catalyst is incredibly powerful way to get these conversations happening faster and further and more deep, more quickly.
Well, thanks so much for reminding me, because I'm quite bad about that. But yes, please do come to our website, localfutures.org. And if you want to have a PhD in localization, we have the resources. You might have to dig, but there is a lot of stuff there, essentially 50 years worth, and many voices from around the world. And we are, as we said earlier, celebrating World Localization Day. So do go to that website too, worldlocalizationday.org, where you will again find inspiration about what's going on around the world. And you will find examples, you'll find contacts that you might want to connect with. So please, yes, do use these resources. We've got short films of 3 minutes, and we've got several films now, sort of an hour long. And we have unbelievable wealth of wonderful speakers from around the world who have been joining us in a series of economics of happiness conferences around the planet. Again, if you want to go deeper, you can listen to some of these remarkable people from around the world. And I do hope you'll also now share this film closer to home and the Power of Local. So right now we're going to play the trailer for Power of Local, and I hope to hear from all of you in the future. Thank you.